Okay, here are some great books for diversity that we have been including in our home. Sorry if you hear my son screaming on the side. He's playing Fortnite. It's a new, I don't know, season or something like that. So he's crazy excited. But this is what we've been using to kind of include diversity into our homeschool program. We've been studying the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. Some of these books are included in our homeschool program. Some are suggestions from our homeschool program that I purchased, and some are books that I have found on my own. So I thought I would just show these to you, because even if your children are in public school, this is part of history that you will not really study. We'll all learn about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and all of that, and which we should. We need to be seen. But these are great stories about people of our history, and some of them actually go up into like the 1950s. So I do have quite a little stack here, as I can show you. I have quite a stack, so I'm going to try and go through them as quickly as possible. Some I might just skim and show you the titles. And remember, I purchased all of these because I like to have them in my collection, but you can feel free to check the library, and I'm sure that you could probably get these free from the library, but I mean, these are great that I want to have them in my collection. We can pull them off and read them whenever we want. And this will be something that I'll put in a box once my kids are no longer, interested in these type of books. Some are picture books, some are chapter books. And once they're not interested in these, and these will be books that will be passed down to my children's children. They'll be able to read these books that I read to them, to their children. So that's why I like to purchase all of my books and keep them in collections, and I will save them for years to come. So, and remember that this is just what we're studying for diversity in this time frame. We also have a huge collection of books that's much bigger than this, of all the, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. I might even just post a picture of all the books in case anybody's interested, because they're all great books. But that I just wanted to be able to show that maybe you could include this in just some free time reading, or if your children are learning about the Revolutionary War or Civil War in school, you can go ahead and read these stories at home, because they probably won't hear about a lot of these people from school. So I've already been 2.5 minutes, so I'm gonna go fast as I can. This is A Voice of Her Own, the story of Phyllis Wheatley. She was the first Black poet in America. She was brought over and purchased, isn't that terrible? She was purchased, I don't even like saying that, by the Wheatley family, and Mrs. Wheatley took a liking to her and decided to educate her, and she basically became the first Black poet in America, and even wrote some poetry about and to George Washington. So that is a great story of America's first. The Daring Escape of Ellen Craft. This is a semi reader, not picture book, chapter book, easy chapter book. This is a story about a husband and wife. The wife was a lighter-skinned Black woman, and their escape from the Georgia South to Pennsylvania, and she posed as a white man, and her husband was her slave. And this is the story of Ellen Craft and her husband as they traveled for days on their train trip from the South to the North to freedom. And then you can see at the end they did gain their freedom at last in Philadelphia. This one, I love this story. Crossing Bak Chitao, or Chitto, I'm not really sure. This is the story of the Bak Chitao River was a river that crossed the Mississippi back before the Trail of Tears, back before the Civil War, and that was the boundary of the Choctaw people. And so on one side of the Bak Chitao River were the Choctaw people. On the other side of the river was a plantation with plantation owners and slaves. And if a slave was ever to make it over to the Bak Chitao River, then they would, the slave owners, it was illegal to go get them on this land. And so they would end up basically being free. So this is the story, and again, these are all true stories. These are all real people from history of one of the, I can't remember her name, one of the Native American Indians, and a boy named Mo. His name was Moses, but everyone called him Mo, little Mo. And he was a slave on the plantation, and they became friends one day. And she actually, as you can see, there's stones in the river. And the Choctaw were able to cross this river because what they would do is when the water would rise up, they would put more stones. When the water would come down, they would remove the stones, but keep it just below the muddy waters right there. So only the Choctaw knew where this crossing was, that they could literally look like they were walking on water. And so as they become friends, as the girl and Mo became friends, she showed him where this crossing was. And every Sunday they would meet. She would come over and perform church services with Mo, and Mo would end up going over after church services, crossing the river and spending time with her family with part of their traditions. Well, one day there was news of a slave sale, and the slave owner announced that 20 slaves would be sold, and they would be leaving before sunrise in the morning. And one of the names on that list was Mo's mother. And so they were preparing to say goodbye to her. And Mo stood up and said, no, we can save our entire family. And so they snuck out beyond the dogs and of all of the slave hunters, snuck out of the house. He crossed the river where the one spot was and went to his friend's, gosh, it's driving me crazy, I can't remember, Martha Tom. Her name was Martha Tom. Knocked on her door and said, I know it's late, and woke up Martha Tom and her mother. And her mother, Martha Tom's mother, said, go, get your family. I have work to do, and we'll meet you at the river, at the crossing. And basically she woke up all the women of the tribe and told them to dress in their white dresses. And they met them with candles at the crossing. And just as they were meeting them at the crossing of this river, the family, all 7 of them, the slave hunters came and had guns drawn, ready to shoot. And the slave owners, or the slave catchers, saw all of these white angels walking on water to save these people, basically. And they were like, oh no, we ain't touching them. That's something wrong. People walking on water there. And so they were able, the Choctaw people saved this entire family, and they lived the rest of their life on the Choctaw Nation and with the Choctaw people. And then there's actually like a nice little story currently of the Choctaw Nation, which is the 3rd largest nation, I think, in Oklahoma. I think it's in Oklahoma. I think that's what it was, of now. But the original signing the Treaty of the Dancing Rabbit Creek in September of 1830, the government forced thousands of Choctaws from their homes in Mississippi. The Choctaws began the trek to the Indian Territory, thus becoming the first travelers of the Trail of Tears. So this is a great story. I love this story. Story of Fanny Lou Hammer. So this is the story, basically, she was born to sharecroppers, and those of you that don't know what sharecroppers was, it was just basically a way to continue slavery. Once slavery was abolished, the owners of the land said, yeah, sure, you can farm our land. You're going to pay us rent every month and pay us a lot of money, and then we're going to take a portion of whatever you sell from your crops. But that was the only way they were allowed to farm the land. So basically the slave owners were still getting all of their money from their land and somebody to work their land, and they weren't having to do anything. They were just getting a monthly check. And then enslaved croppers weren't making any money because they were basically spending, making very little money. So she was born to sharecroppers family, 20 children. Also, I want to point out, this is a Caldecott. And this is also a Greta Scott King Award. And I don't know what this award is, to tell you the truth. But anything that is a Caldecott medal, for anyone that doesn't know, we all know that it's a great book. If it's a Caldecott medal, it's a great book. Caldecott medals are given for illustrations. That's why only children's books have them. So any book that has a Caldecott medal, you know, has outstanding illustrations in it. You don't even need to open it up to know that the pictures are going to be fabulous in it, because only the best of the best are going to get a Caldecott medal. And the Greta Scott King Award is, let me read it. It is a Nonviolent Social Change, Brotherhood, and Peace Award. So basically, it is just saying that this is a great story to show nonviolence and peace, and should be read in stories. But to be honest, I don't know what this one is. So basically, Fanny Lou Hammer had a very interesting life, and she ran for public office many times. Many times. She became the first woman to run for public office. There's much more to her story, but I don't want to get into it. Where is, well, I don't know where my other book is, but this book is Let It Shine. And the reason I'm showing you this book is because it has Shirley Chisholm in it. And for those of you that don't know who Shirley Chisholm is she was the first woman to be elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. So Fanny Lou Hammer basically paved the way for people like Shirley Chisholm. So Let It Shine is just a book of Black freedom fighters, all the way from Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Shirley Chisholm, Dorothy Irene Height, Ella Josephine Baker, Sojourner Truth, which I have a picture book of Sojourner Truth. So this is a great book that is past history and some, current, 1950s history of just women freedom fighters. And this, of course, is not a picture book, but you could easily just pick one woman from here, and spend 2 or 3 days just reading a couple pages of each and getting their story. Black Heroes of the Revolution. So Black Heroes of the Revolution is just a story of 13 soldiers, and I didn't grab my other, I have one more book that's actually a hardcover that has other stories of other men from the Revolutionary War, but that are just important Black men or the Black heroes of the Revolutionary War. One of those heroes, he's actually in this book, and he's in my other book that I have, is a man named James. This story is called A Spy Named James. And basically, this is the story of a slave that had found out George Washington basically said, hey, if I join the Union Army and fight for the Union, we'll be able to get freedom. So he joined the Union Army and worked under General Lafayette. And General Lafayette actually fought the Union against Cornwallis in the Confederation. So over time, Lafayette sent James on a mission to just dress in ragged clothes and pretty much try and get information from Cornwallis, and see if you can bring anything back. So James was more than willing to go, and he befriended Cornwallis, and pretty much they just talked around James and said whatever they said, because he was nothing. They were like, yeah, sure, you can come wash our tables and pick our food and do whatever. Yes, you can come and be there for us. So they didn't pay any mind to him, basically. So they were talking about war plans and everything, and then James was going back to Lafayette and telling him all of what they were planning on doing. Well, then come to find out, over time, Cornwallis actually begins to like Lafayette, or to like James. And Cornwallis says, hey, James, will you pretend to go over and try and befriend Lafayette in the Union and get some information? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll try and be friends with him and get some information. So James was actually bringing information from the Confederate to Lafayette in the Union, and then they were turning around and giving misinformation back to Cornwallis in the Confederate. So basically, he was working as a double agent through this whole thing. And without him, we may not have won the battle. So when all it was over with, and then the war was over, James actually didn't get his freedom. He was not awarded freedom. And Lafayette found out about this and was just in an uproar, because freedom was only given to soldiers. And James was not a soldier. He was a spy. And so Lafayette actually wrote a letter, went to Congress, and said, no, this man deserves his freedom. He has gone above and beyond and basically fought for his freedom. And 3 years after the war was won, James was actually not even just awarded freedom, he was awarded a congressional freedom. And so for that honor, that's when he took the last name of Lafayette, because of course slaves don't have last names. So he took the last name James Lafayette in honor of the man who fought for him to gain his freedom. So I'm going to go through just a couple. This is just from Slave to Soldier. This is just a nice little picture book. This is Henry's Freedom Box. I just got this one not long ago, and this is a great book. Again, it's a Caldecott, so the illustrations and the pictures are going to be wonderful. But this is a true story, again, of a man named Henry who was born into slavery, and over time he finds a woman. Well, his family, of course, with every story of slavery, his family was torn apart, and he had never seen his parents again. His slave owner sold him to another slave owner that he had to basically make tobacco and tobacco leaves. Over time, he meets a woman and falls in love, and they are married. Well, they're not legally married because slaves can't legally marry. They jump the broom. But he ends up having a wonderful marriage, and they end up having 2 children. So one day, as he's working as a slave in the factory, the tobacco factory, he gets word from someone, and I don't know where the picture is. He gets word from someone that his wife and his children have just been sold. And so he rushes to try and save them, and he's too late. His children are sold somewhere else, and his wife is sold to a different plantation. And he's just devastated. His life is just nothing anymore. So he decides he gets the help of some abolitionists and some ministers in the area that send word to the abolitionists in the north, and he mails himself. So this gentleman right here helps him. They build a box just his size, and he actually nails him shut. So he ends up writing, the address on there, and please write this side up. So he ends up throughout the story mailing himself, and this is the story of him spending many days. He traveled train, he traveled boat, all in this box. I mean, here's 2 people sitting on him. Sometimes he was upside down. It was just an awful journey until he arrives on the doorsteps of some abolitionists in Pennsylvania that knock on the box and say, "Henry, are you in there?" And he says yes, and they open up the box, and out pops Henry to freedom. So this is a great picture book, Henry's Freedom Box. I like that one. I actually haven't read that. I've read that one myself, but I haven't read that one to the kids yet. This is a story of Ona Judge. Ona Judge was a slave of George and Martha Washington. She was actually Martha Washington's slave from before they were married. And she was one of the most renowned slaves. She was always with Martha. She went with Martha everywhere. She mended her clothes. She went on all shopping trips. When they went to Washington, D.C., when he became president, she actually lived in the White House. And the Washingtons gave her money at times so that she could buy like Christmas gifts and stuff for her family, which was really unheard of for slaves. I mean, you didn't give your slaves any money. But one day, Martha Washington gives word to Ona Judge that she's actually going to be giving Ona to her granddaughter as a dowry slave, which means a dowry slave is a slave that no matter what happens in the marriage or the husband, that the slave that is given to the granddaughter, to the woman, always belongs to the woman. And Ona had known this granddaughter, was not treated very well by this granddaughter for many, many years as she would visit, Mount Vernon and the White House. So Ona runs away. And George Washington actually sends people after her, chases after her, and she continues to escape him and evade him. It's a great story of how Ona Judge stood up for herself in the face of slavery. So Tall Within. This is a story of Sojourner Truth. Like I told you, she is one of the people that is in that book. This is the story of Sojourner Truth, who was actually born a slave, Elizabeth. And this slave, she later, through her whole story, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's almost 20 minutes long. But she basically, after all of her trials and tribulations as a slave, she decides she needs to go on this journey and to kind of bring slaves up, to speak freedom, to give basically motivational speaker. And so that's how she changes her name from Elizabeth to Sojourner Truth, because she's going to take a journey of truth. And so she travels for many years through Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, all of that, some Ohio, a little bit in New York, speaking the truth about slavery and really trying to rise people up. And then this is Schomburg, the man who built a library. Basically, he was a very smart man, a mathematician, a scholar, everything that you possibly could be. He was everything, and obsessed with reading and finding history of African culture. And basically, he's pretty much started the New York Public Library. The Carnegie Corporation purchased his collection of books. It was so large that his wife pretty much said, "It's your books or your family, because you have too many books in our house." And so the Carnegie Corporation in the 1920s paid him $10,000 for his collection of books, which in the 1920s, that's a boatload of money. And he actually started he was pivotal in starting the New York City Library in Harlem, the Harlem Library. Okay, I have 3 more, so I'm gonna 21 minutes. So this is Dear Benjamin Banneker. And Benjamin Banneker was, he was actually born a free man. But, and so he became a mathematician and astrologer. He was actually the first black man to write an almanac. But he was never really, he never really realized, he's like, why? Or he never really understood why some men could be free and other men were born enslaved. And so he really spoke up about the rights of enslaved people. And what he's most renowned for and most known for is actually writing a letter and calling out Thomas Jefferson for writing in the Declaration of Independence, because for those of you that may not know, Thomas Jefferson was the one that actually wrote the Declaration of Independence. Other people like Benjamin Franklin did give their input, but 90% of it was written by his hand and his thoughts, Thomas Jefferson. So he basically called out Thomas Jefferson about inalienable rights for everybody. And he's like, how is that inalienable rights for everybody when you have people that are considered property and not even human beings? So he was basically an early civil rights leader. This is Phoebe the Spy. And Phoebe the Spy, this is a pretty common book in most homeschool circles. So if you're homeschooling, you probably already have this one. But this is pretty much the story of a free black woman that was born. Her father owned a business. And he asked her pretty much to pretend to be the housekeeper of George Washington. Because there was word that there was a plot to assassinate him. So she pretty much goes undercover as a spy, as his housekeeper, and thwarts a plot to assassinate George Washington. So without Phoebe, there may have been an assassination on George Washington. And the best for last, Moses. This is a Caldecott Award and a Greta Scott King Award book. And I am going to show you, I'm going to take the time to show you a couple of these illustrations because they're beautiful. So this is Moses when Harriet Tubman led her people to freedom. I love this book. I love everything about Harriet Tubman. I'm obsessed with this woman. And just, Moses was actually who everyone was looking for when Harriet Tubman was going back and freeing the slaves and working the Underground Railroad. They weren't looking for little tiny black little Harriet Tubman about this big. They were actually looking for a white man with blackface going by the name of Moses that was an abolitionist. So that's how ingenious and intelligent this woman is. They didn't have them looking for her, little tiny old black woman. They had them looking for some big tall white dude going by the name of Moses. You just keep looking for him. You just keep looking. He's out there. So this is a beautiful, beautiful book. And I'm just going to show you a few of these. And of course, when these are on video, none of these books give any of these pictures justice. I mean, they're so much more beautiful in real life. But I mean, look at the illustrations and how detailed all of those beautiful illustrations are. So this is another book that I highly, highly recommend. I mean, it's just beautiful, and it will keep attention of your children. There's so much for them to look at as you're reading the pages. I mean, my children are just enthralled with this. They just love these pictures. Oh my goodness, just look at that. I mean, just how beautiful and intricate, and you can see the pain, the hurt, the hope in her face. I mean, it's all there in that picture. Everything is in that one photograph. So I hope this helps. I know this is like a 25-minute video, but these are great books to kind of bring diversity in and tell stories of history that maybe your children won't hear about in school, or even if your children are too young to hear. It's never too young to start reading some beautiful picture books. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.